when it comes to using Excel, there's some essential tools that everybody should know how to use, and it's just going to make using Excel much easier, quicker. I mean, it's just essential things that everybody should know and should be using. First one I want to talk about today is named ranges. I know that we have talked about it in previous sessions, and I will talk about it in every Excel session because named ranges give us a lot of benefits. So basically what a named range is when we click on a cell, we refer to it based on the cell location. Like I'm on K3 right now. So the name box, which just so everybody knows the same things, at the top left, right underneath the ribbon is the name box. We usually look at it and say, okay, here's the name of the cell I'm on, but it does a lot more. It can be used to give an actual name to that cell. So the workbook that I happen to be in actually has a lot of named ranges because we can use them in formulas to make the formulas easier to understand, which we'll also talk about tables today, which also use named ranges so that it makes it easier to read the formulas. So when somebody looks at the formula, we know what it's doing. So definitely want to be using named ranges, but there's a lot of reasons to use them. I can't cover all of them today, but I will be referencing these named ranges. First thing is you can see all of the named ranges by going to the Formulas tab of the ribbon. From the Formulas tab of the ribbon, we have this Defined Names group. If you click Name Manager, this will open up a list of all of the named ranges within your current workbook. You can sort by any of these columns. As you can see, I'm just kind of clicking on these. This one happens to have lots of named ranges in it. So it's a good idea to take advantage of these for not only being able to understand the formulas better, but it makes it quicker and easier to create the formulas. Because a lot of things we do in finance or just in general being a business leader is formula related. We're going to cover a few of those here today, but I really want to get into some structure of some other things that we use as leaders in our organizations, and really kind of focusing in on tables and being able to set up a dashboard where we can analyze our data. So once the data is all entered in, it's a great way to be able to analyze that information. And by the way, I'm going to throw in a couple of things today on some brand new features. Some of these new features are only available in the Excel Online version. Some are available in the desktop version, but eventually they will all be available in the desktop version. In your handout, you are going to find a link to a website, a Microsoft website, that is going to give you a list of all of the financial functions. So you can see there's a lot. There's over 50 different financial functions built into Excel. I do not know which ones you've used in the past, which ones would be beneficial for what it is that you do. So I'm only going to talk about a few of these today and talk about some of the really universal functions to make sure everybody understands those. So just so you're aware of this, this is that alphabetical list of all of the financial functions. So as I'm just kind of scrolling down, there's one here called PPMT function, which returns the payment on the principal of the investment of a given period. If I click on it, just so you're going to see what's going to happen with this, why I really love this website is it takes you and it gives you a description of the entire syntax, breaks apart each of the arguments. So this particular function has multiple arguments. Some are optional. It's going to say required. It will tell you which ones are optional. It's going to give you examples of how to use these. Some of these will even give you videos that you can watch. But the more you practice with these, just having a sheet like the ones we shared with you, the easier it will be to use these. So I just wanted to show you that site here real quick. The next thing that I really want to mention before I dive into named ranges and these other things is if you go to your File menu and click New, you have access to a lot of different templates. You can narrow kind of the list down of templates by clicking on the suggested search of business, it would show you all of the business related. Or if you just simply want to do a search, like maybe I want to do a search on finance. If I just do a search in the templates on finance, look at all the templates. There are so many that you don't have to start from scratch. You could actually start with a template and then just tweak it for your own information. But it depends on, where does your information come from? Are you coming in and doing data entry, or are you importing it from your accounting system, your ERP system, AS400, whatever the case might be? You could still utilize these tools. And a couple of these that I really like. Here's a budget summary report. I mean, there's so many invoices, balance sheets, all kinds of different choices when it comes to these. So I'm just going to click on this one called balance sheet just to give you an idea. These would come pre-formatted, so it's going to save you a lot of work. So this is just a summary, and it's showing the current year and the previous year. It's got assets, it's got liabilities, it's got categories. Now, do I always use these directly? Sometimes no. Sometimes I use them because they give me ideas on how I can organize, or the features I could be using in my own formulas, or in my own sheets, I should say. And I just wanted to point out that when I actually click on this balance sheet, it's in a table. Tables are very, very commonly used with financial information for a lot of reasons. So one of the reasons is, and I know that I'm in a table, by the way, because if I look at the ribbon, it says table design. And I'm on a formula that is called a sum if s. This particular, if I kind of break this formula down, sum if s is a very commonly used function that adds together a set of values, but it has multiple criterias. So it's only adding the cells that match a criteria. In this case, it has an S with it, the sum if s, which means multiple criterias. So when I look at this, I can see that it's based on assets the prior year. Assets is the name of the table, and the field name is prior year. Then it's the assets table, and it's the asset type. You can kind of break this down, and then it's doing another sum if, etc. going on. So we can kind of look at a formula that's in the formula bar when you click on a cell and be able to really break that apart. As a matter of fact, I have some information about kind of tips for understanding your formulas in your handout as well. I just feel that sometimes somebody else can develop a workbook and we come in and start using it, and we need ways to figure out what is it doing. But I just wanted to mention that there's all these different templates available in Excel. You don't always have to start from scratch. But I'm going to close this template, not going to save it or anything like that. And I'm actually back into the practice file called Excel for CFOs. The first thing that I'm going to talk about is named ranges. And I'm going to go to this worksheet called GL Details. So this is just a general ledger that has the account column. It has the description, the period, the amount, and the category. And if I want to analyze this data, I sometimes want to turn this into having named ranges, because if I'm always going to be referring to the description column, the period column, the amount column, I probably want to have those be named ranges to make it easier when I go to analyze it. So just so you could see, I'm going to actually do Control A. Control A is a keyboard shortcut to select my entire range. Because I was on a cell within the range, it selects just that range of data. And all I'm going to do is go back to the Formulas tab, to this Defined Names group, and I'm going to click Create from Selection. So what this is doing is asking me which of the columns or rows do I want to use to name the cells. It selected two. I don't want the right column. It thinks the right column because the right column was text, but I want the top row to be used to name each one of these should say each one of these columns going down. So I'm going to just click OK. What it just did, And I'm going to say replace. Yes, I want to replace that because I already had those as named ranges, a couple of them. But basically what it just did was created a named range for the account column, the description, the period, the amount, and the category. How do I know that it did that? If I go to the name box at the top left, I can click on the drop down and I can actually see all the named ranges. If I click account, it selects the range of cells within that account column. And when I go to create a formula, I can simply use the name of the range instead of having to keep going back and selecting the range. Because I don't know about you, but if I have 10,000 rows of information and I'm going to use it in 10 different formulas, I don't want to have to keep going back and selecting it. So there's a lot of different ways we can take advantage of having named ranges. That's all I'm going to say on that topic today because we're short on time. I want to get to a few other things. And one of the things is we have a lot of different types of functions. As I said, there's over 50 functions that are related to finance alone. But then there's a handful of functions that you're going to use every day, even if it's not a financial function. So I gave you on page 2 of your handout the really kind of the top finance functions that people use. Typical sum. We're going to also talk about sum if and other things, but sum is definitely a function everybody should know how to use. PMT, the FV, the NPV, and the IRR are different types of functions that you should get yourself familiar with. I did give you examples of using all of those, and to make it super easy to understand these, what I also did was Mason actually shared with you another workbook that is actually a workbook that has a bunch of different examples of financial functions. Let me show that to you. Okay, come on, computer. Don't. Come on. Sorry, it's for some reason my file is a little bit slow here, but let me kind of open this up for you. I want to show you this because this will be a great reference tool for you to come back to when you go to use some of these formulas. And I just think it's kind of easier if you kind of see them in action. And this isn't something I developed. I actually found this on the internet, and I've been using it for years. So you can see that there's several different sheets down at the bottom, and I'm going to demonstrate a brand new feature. I'm going to go to the View tab of the ribbon. I'm going to click Navigation, because it's going to open a navigation pane by default on the right-hand side. This is a new feature in Excel, and it allows you to go to any of the sheets to navigate sheet by sheet. And then inside each sheet, it expands out the different details you have in each sheet to jump to cells that have either named ranges or values in them. So it helps you to jump to specific areas. But basically what this is set up with, and I highly recommend you take a look at this after our session because I don't have time to cover everything, but this is going to show you different, like this is a future schedule function that is being used, and it gives you practice to do it yourself. So each one of these sheets is going to show you the present value. It's going to show you the different X lookups coming with these as well. So each of these is going to give you the example and then have you practice it on your own on the right hand side. So highly recommend taking a look at these. So it's going to give you different options to really kind of see if these are things that would be beneficial to you. Now, I'm not going to go through any more on that, but you got to love this navigation pane. I use navigation in Microsoft Word all the time, so I was super excited to have navigation here in Excel. I actually use it all day long. Now that it's there, I use it all the time. But let me come back to this worksheet. So this worksheet in this workbook called Excel for CFOs, what I want to actually show you in here is a couple of different PMT related functions. So very common in Excel with financial data is to actually need to be able to calculate payments based on a loan and an interest rate. Actually a very simple to use function. And I remember when I first learned it, it's like, Oh, okay, that's super easy. Now I can figure these out with no issues whatsoever. I used to work a lot harder until I started to figure out some of these financial functions. So what this is going to give you is the annual interest rate up at the top. It's got the years, it's got the payment, it's got the amount, just to give you some examples. And on the right-hand side, I gave you some examples of what these functions are doing. So basically, we have the payment. So it's showing the number of payments, by the way, 1 through 24. And then next to it is going to be the payment using the PMT function. Now notice what it's doing in here. In this formula, I want to kind of get you to understand the breakdown. This is actually the annual interest rate divided by the payments per year. What that is referring to is the named cell. So when I go to payments per year, which is B3, the name box tells me the name of that cell. So kind of referring back to the names of the cells. So basically what this is doing, and I'm just going to double click on it, you can see that it automatically highlights every cell that it's using. And these are named ranges. So we have payment per year, we have years, and then it's multiplying it by the payments per year, and then we have the amount. And that's going to be the future value. So you can see the screen tip, but another thing for breaking these down is going into the FX. Once you click FX, it's going to break that formula down into the separate arguments, and it gives you a description based on whichever argument you're clicked on. If you need additional help on any of these, just go to the bottom left, click on help on this function. And that's going to take you into the Excel website, the Microsoft website, and break out that formula like I showed you on that other list of all those financial functions. Just so you're aware also, it's got the principal, which is using the PPMT function. And you can see the description over here that that function is used to calculate the principal of the payment. And then we have the interest, the IPMT function, and then it's got the balance. And the balance starts by taking the amount plus C7, the principal, but then it's going to jump down. And then it was copied down to where we get to the zero balance after our 24 months. So just something to kind of get your thought process going to make these break down and make them a little bit easier to understand. Also, on the formulas tab of the ribbon, if you go to the financial category, this is going to give you a list of every financial function. When you click on one, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Let me go back, sorry. When you hesitate, didn't mean to click. When you hesitate, you're going to see it automatically gives you a screen tip describing that function. And notice it has this tell me more. Tell me more will take you directly into help. So it's a good idea to kind of look through each of these, kind of see what they are. That's why I like the website, because it's got a list of all of them, and then you can click on the one that you want to look at. But I don't know for sure which ones are going to be most beneficial to you. So I thought this would be a good rundown for you to have. But let's get into a few other things because our time is going to go by so fast. I do have on pages 3 the future value. It's got a lot of different breakouts and some examples of using these. But I'm going to jump back to the GL details worksheet. And I'm going to be doing some formulas based on this data. And I'm going to be doing some formulas, really kind of breaking things down based on payroll information as well, just to give you an idea of some everyday functions. Even if you're not using any financial functions, these are everyday functions that people in leadership roles use. So what I want to do to make this easier is to put it in a table. So in your handout, you'll find information about using Excel tables. Excel tables have a lot of advantages to them. So I'm going to turn it into a table by going to Insert. I'm going to click Table on the left-hand side of the ribbon. I'm going to then click OK because it selected my range of cells. Once I click OK, this whole range has now been turned into a table, and I can do further analysis with it. I won't get into a lot of detail on that. Hopefully you're using tables already, but I'm going to change the formatting right away by going to the Table Design tab, and I want to make it a little bit easier to kind of see the information. So I have banded rows turned on. I have the header up at the top, which freezes as I'm scrolling down, scrolling up. it freezes everything. Plus, if I click on the drop down for the headers at the top, I get my sorting and my filtering capabilities, just so you're aware of what you get and the benefits of having a table. But you also want to name your table. It's going to help with the formulas you create based on this information. So when you're on the table design tab, go to the left-hand side, click in the table name, and give it a name to identify what it is. So I'm going to name this GL details, because that's what the range of cells is. It has the same rules as naming a cell, by the way, because it does become a named range. So no spaces in the names when you name your pivot tables, your tables, or cells, ranges of cells. Okay. Now, just to show you some analysis that we could be doing in different worksheets, I'm going to come back to this one. I'm going to go to the payroll raw data worksheet. This is just some payroll information based on each of the employees. So we've got this column for employees, and I want to be able to analyze this very quickly and easily. And this isn't a table. I know it's in a table because if I click on a cell, I have my table design tab up at the top. Plus, I can see I've got banded rows and I've got my drop downs for my filters. But I want to actually do a couple of formulas with you. And I kind of pre-designed this a little bit, where I'm going to go to the gross wages. And on L1, I want to create a formula that gives us the sum of the gross wages. Now, of course, I could do just a regular sum to analyze that data, but what if I wanted to change as we filter this data? I could actually do it as a subtotal function instead. So I'm going to do equal SU. I'm going to double click on the function called subtotal. And by the way, if you've never seen this before, when you start typing, the functions have the FX circle on the left-hand side. If it's a named range or a table, it will have the squares. So you can see which ones are named ranges versus which ones are functions. I'm going to double click on subtotal. What the subtotal is going to give you, and you're going to see this used all the time in financial data, you can do multiple functions with it. And I want to do a sum, so I'm just going to double click on the 9, which is the hidden code to the computer to let it know I want to do a sum. So I'm going to double click on it. I'm going to do a comma to separate my arguments, and I want to have it based on the gross wages. So I'm going to click on K10, and I'm going to do Shift Control down arrow because I wanted to select all the way down that column. I'm going to do Control Enter, and I'm going to look at that formula, and you're going to see that it automatically is adding together everything within that column. But if things change by me filtering this data in this table, it will automatically change the answer to that subtotal, by the way. But let me do a couple of other things. When it comes to analyzing data, leadership roles are just whatever role you have within your organization, it doesn't matter. One of the things that you may want to have available is a drop-down list. So data validation, which is described in your handout as well, allows you to do a drop-down list. So on cell K3, I want a drop-down list of all of the individual departments coming from column F, the individual department columns, because I'm going to do gross wages by department. I'm going to do a formula based on that using a sum if. So what I want to do then is on K3, I'm going to go to the Data tab of the ribbon, and then in the Data Tools group, I'm going to click on the icon for Data Validation. On the Settings tab, I'm going to go to Allow Any Value, and I'm going to choose List because I want to create a drop-down list. In the source is where you could physically type, separated by commas, the values you want, or you could actually use a range of cells. I happen to have a worksheet called Legend. This is the unique values coming from the department. There technically is only 3. If I select those, that's going to be my source of this drop-down list. And how I created this legend, by the way, is I copied all of the departments, then I removed duplicates, and it gave me this unique list. just so you know how I did it. I do that all the time. I'm going to click OK. So it brought me back to K3 on this worksheet. Now I have a drop-down arrow that I can choose which department I want to use. So I'm going to go to L3 and I'm going to create a formula that is going to give us the gross wages per department as I change the department name on K3. So on cell L3, I'm going to create a formula using the sum if. Now what the sum if function does, and I'm going to double click on it here just so you can see. I'm going to double click on sum if. So basically what it's looking for is what is the range of cells I want to evaluate, and then what is going to be the criteria, and what is going to be the range of cells I want to add together. So the range that I want it to evaluate is actually going to be based on the department column. So I'm going to go to column F and I'm going to select the departments. I'm going to click and drag all the way down. So I did that Control Shift down arrow. Just so you can see, it adds it in the formula with the table name and the name of the field. In square brackets, it shows the name of the field. It makes it much easier to understand what it's doing, which, by the way, these formulas could all be on the dashboard, which I'll show you in a second. So anyway, now it wants to know what is going to be my criteria. Well, my criteria, if I wanted it to always be the OPS, I could physically type that in the formula. But what if I want it to refer to K3, and K3 is going to change on a regular basis? I don't want to just type in ops and have to go back to the formula and change it. Something else that I could do is quote equal quote. I could put the ampersand in. Then I can click on K3 so that it always refers to that cell. Then I can continue on to the sum range. So it's basically saying whatever is in K3 is going to be my criteria, instead of me putting in the name of the department and having to keep modifying the formula. So now I need to tell it what are the cells I want to add together. Well, I want it to add together the gross wages. So I'm going to select all of the gross wages, and you can do it however you want to do it. I could have had it as a named range, which I most likely would have, but just so you could see, it adds that in as saying the name of the table and then that column, gross wage. I'm just going to Control Enter, and you're going to see that it automatically has added together all of the gross wages, but only based on the department that I have in K3. If I go back and change that to a different department, it's going to automatically update which wage it's finding, the total for that wage. So that's one way to really be able to analyze that information. Now, of course, we could take that further and we could be doing a count if. So how many entries are actually in the ops group? I could do a count if to say count all of the departments based on K3, whatever department I have on K3. Or I could say give me an average if the department matches the whatever department I have on K3. And it's going to be based on the cells within that gross wages. So we have a lot of different if type functions that we could be using. I'll just do an example with one. I'll do the count if. So, and these are all described within your handout, by the way. I'm going to do equal COU, and I'm going to double click on count if, where all it wants to know is what is the range of cells I wanted to analyze and what is my criteria. So I wanted to count the departments. So how many entries in that department? So I'm just going to select that range for the department. Once again, it adds it in as the name and then, of course, the department field. I'm going to put in a comma because it wants to know now what is the criteria. Well, once again, just like I did with the sum if, I want to do quote equal, and it has to be in quotes because it's actually text. So that's why it's in quotes. And I'm going to do the ampersand again, and I'm going to click on K3. K3 so that it always refers to whatever I put in that cell. Instead of me entering ops as my department and having to go back to the formula and change it, I'm going to control enter to stay on that cell, and it automatically is giving me an answer of 41. So there's 41 entries that are related to the ops department. If I change the ops department to G&A, it's going to update any formula that is related to that. Now, just to take that a step further, the last function I'm going to do right now is called an XLOOKUP. And I'm going to do this a little quick because I've got several other things I want to get to yet in our short period of time. But I'm going to go to O2 and I'm going to do a lookup based on the employee number to find that employee's gross wages. I'm going to do equal XLOOKUP. If you have not used an XLOOKUP, I don't use a VLOOKUP or an HLOOKUP anymore. This is my replacement for that. So basically, it wants to know, what do I want to look up? I want to look up whichever employee number is on N2. That's going to be my lookup value. Comma, to separate the arguments, it wants to know where is it going to find that employee number. So I'm going to select all of these employee numbers in column H. Now, of course, I could have done my shift control down arrow. I could have had it as a named range, however it is that you want to enter it in. But it's going to add the table name and that field name. Comma, it wants to know, where's the answer coming from? I want the answer to be coming from the wages. So I'm going to select the gross wages because that's where the answer, once it finds that employee, it's going to go to the gross wages column and find the gross wage that matches that employee. Once again, it adds it into the formula based on the name of the table and the gross wages. I'm going to put in a comma to do one more argument, which is optional. I'm going to say, if not found. It is a built-in error code so that if the employee ID number is not found in that list, it will give me whatever error I enter. So I'm going to say EMP not found. And I'm going to put a quote around that because it's text. I'm going to control enter, and it automatically found the gross wage for the employee that I have entered. Now, of course, I could format that cell. However you want to format it, it can be formatted as well. So you can see that employee 10 has this gross wage. Every time I change to a different employee, it's going to update that. And I could have that as a drop down. But if I enter in an employee that is not there, like 00, it's going to come back with that error saying employee not found. So the XLOOKUP is a great option for doing that. But let's move to another topic here real quick. So I want to actually talk about using, and by the way, in your handout is the XLOOKUP. The XLOOKUP is actually located on page 6 and 7 with some different examples of using that and going to page 8. The subtotal function is also on page 8 going to page 9. But I want to go to forecasting. At the bottom of page 9 going to page 10, a very common feature to use in Excel is actually going to be forecasting. I'm going to go back to this general ledger details worksheet, and I'm going to turn this into a forecast sheet. Built into Excel is forecasting functions, but we have a forecast sheet that it can create on its own. So I just have to be within my range of cells, or I can select the range of cells I want it to use. So I'm going to control home just to get back up to the top here. But basically, it's going to be using this period and the amount column. These are the columns that it's going to analyze. So I should have done the shortcut to this, but just so you know, that's the columns that it's going to use. It uses a date and it uses a value column in your range of cells to do forecasting. So we can say, I want you to start based on this historical information and then go out through 2025 and tell me, based on this historical data, what do you predict for the future moving forward based on whatever my end date is. How this works is going to the data tab of the ribbon on the right hand side in the forecast group, you can click forecast sheet. This will select your range of data, and it's going to open up this forecast sheet dialog box showing you a line chart at the top. So we can see based on the dates going across the bottom here, it's analyzing things out through December 31st of 2023. That's a forecast end date. But if you click options, you can expand this and you can actually change when is it starting and how far out do you want it to go. I'm okay with the start, but I want it to actually go out through 2024. And it's got a confidence level of 95%. And on the right-hand side, it's using the timeline range, which is the column C, where it has all of the dates. Then the value range is actually column D, the amounts. And it knew that by default. Then all I have to do is click create. I could have made more changes to this, but what it does is it analyzes it in a different sheet. It automatically is going to give you a line chart. And the line chart is actually showing you the amount, the forecast amount, and the lower and the upper confidence levels. And what it did on the new sheet that it gave you is it gave you the forecast amount, the lower confidence and the upper confidence levels, and it started analyzing each of the data, each of the sets of data, saying, starting in 2023, here's what it's going to be for the forecast amount, but here's the lower confidence, upper confidence level, and it's using the forecast.ets type functions for each of these. So you can actually click on the cells and see the formula behind the scenes that it automatically created. So when I go and look at December 31st of 2024, here's what it's predicting in that last row of this range. Unbelievable how easy this can be. Just so you know, there's data validation in your handout as well, but I want to go into working with pivot tables, and I'm going to go back into the GL details because a lot of times we want to be able to analyze the information in a pivot table. So this data is already in a regular table, so I'm just going to turn it into a pivot table so I can analyze it further. Now, I could be using any type of data. I could be using the payroll data. As long as you have your information in columns and you have a header row to uniquely identify each field. I can go to the Insert tab, click Pivot Table, and it will automatically start. It selects your range of data. I'm just going to click OK for right now on that, and it automatically gives you a field list on the right-hand side. I'm not going to do too much with this based on our time, but I can actually choose the description. It will give me a unique list of all of the descriptions in the pivot table. I could then choose the amount, and it's going to do a sum based on each of those descriptions. So it's got the general ledger account number and then a description of what the general ledger is. If I just do account, I'd have to go back and look up what does that description of that general ledger account number. So this way it's a little bit easier. So that's how it was organized. If I wanted to filter this data, the best part is in a regular table and in a pivot table, we have slicers and timelines. If I go to the Analyze tab of the Pivot Table Tools, I can click Insert Slicer. And if I want to be able to quickly and easily filter the information in this pivot table or a regular table, because regular tables can use slicers as well, we can choose what is the field or fields I want to be able to filter by. I'm going to choose Description and Category and click OK. So now I've got these two little slicer windows that I can organize any way I want them to look. I can change how many columns they're going to use. I can change their width. All kinds of different things can happen with these slicers. I won't get into detail, but how do you use them? What if I only want to see this particular, let me kind of make that a little bit wider so you can see which one it is. Maybe I want to go to a category and I only want to see if it's based on AP. When I click AP, it automatically filters my pivot table based on AP. If I had any related formulas to it, it would automatically update those as well. Up at the top right of this slicer, I can click this clear filter and it will automatically unfilter. If I click any of my descriptions, it filters based on that description. I can clear it again by going to the top right like we do. But just so you're aware, all of this could actually be in a dashboard. A lot of times with leaders or financial CFOs or anyone, we use dashboards to analyze our data. I happen to just do an example of a dashboard for you. I got a sheet called dashboard, but I could be taking that payroll information and I could copy this range of cells. Actually, it doesn't even need to reside here. I could just have it on the dashboard, and it's analyzing information from a different location. So maybe I'm going to have payroll data over here, just so you can kind of see how I could do this. Then I could paste this information. Oops, sorry, I lost my, let me go back and copy that again, sorry. I'm going to come back to the dashboard, and I'm going to paste that information. So it can automatically, and by the way, I'm going to paste that a little bit differently here. I'm actually going to do a paste link so that it automatically will update these to match whatever happens in the other worksheet. Now, of course, I want to have my columns spread out here a little bit, but just so you can see what it automatically did. I don't need those cells, but just so you can see what it automatically has done. It put these 0% in all of the blank cells, but I'll leave those for right now. And just so you can see, I could go back and make changes to these at any time because that's what it does. It automatically is linked back to those cells. But what about my pivot table that I created? I'm going to actually create a new pivot table and have it go here on the financial dashboard. And I could be using slicers and things. And by the way, I could just copy this pivot table just so you could see. I could cut it. So I'm going to cut it. I'm going to paste it on the dashboard because by default, it's automatically doing it on a new sheet. But I'm going to tell it I want it to be here instead now that I have this dashboard created. So now I have this pivot table right here. I could still be using the slicers. So let me go back and get the slicers. So I'm going to take both of these slicers and cut them, and I'm going to put them on the dashboard. So everything can actually be right here. So as I need to make changes to things, let me move this one right here. So that as I need to change the financial dashboard, I click on what it is I want to filter by, and it automatically shows me that information right here. Plus, I've got all my payroll data, so it's all this information that I need to analyze in one central location. Now, just so you know also, we could create a chart based on this data. So let's say that I want a chart based on this pivot table of this general ledger information, or whether it was payroll information or whatever financial information you're using. It can be a pivot chart. By going to the Pivot Table Analyze tab when you are in a pivot table, you can simply go to the right, click Pivot Chart. Choose the type of chart you want, which, by the way, there's a lot of different options. There's funnel, there's waterfalls, there's box and whisker, which I have some of these described for you. There's histograms, which can include Paretos, sunburst, tree maps. There's pie charts, bar charts, whatever type of chart it is, it's going to actually show you an example of what it would look like on the right. I'm just going to choose column, make it nice and easy. I'm going to click OK. That is directly connected to the pivot table. Now I'm just going to move it to the right a little bit, because as I filter based on my slicers, it's going to update the pivot table and it's going to update the chart automatically. So every time I filter, whether it's based on either of my slicers, it will automatically update both my pivot table and my chart at the same time. So having a dashboard that is feeding from another worksheet can be an essential tool to use. Now, this is not very pretty to look at right now, but of course you can make them look pretty. And as a matter of fact, a lot of those templates that we have can do that for us. Those templates can really be used. And let me show you an example of one. So this is a great example. It's a little bit too much font sizes and different things, but you can always change it. But this is a way that you could say whatever your revenue of your sales is, you can be using spark lines, which is taking data from a range of cells and giving you mini charts in a column, So it's showing you the trend of all of the numbers going across from January through December. So this is a great, easy to use dashboard look. Now, I could have charts and different things, pivot tables and slicers and different things going along with this. But here's a cost of sales example. Here's an example of the expenses. So just some easy on the eyes ways to have at a glance look at things. Now, of course, these sheets can be buttons on the dashboard that if I want to go see revenue sales, I could click on a button that takes me to the revenue sales. There's a lot of different ways these dashboards can be set up. We could do a session just on dashboards to have you truly understand the benefit of these and how you can use them, especially with financial information. I use dashboards all the time. But that's just one example that I wanted to briefly show you. When it comes to creating these pivot tables, using these slicers, or using timelines which are date field related, it's a great way to be able to instantly change the information that you're seeing. But what if you have data that is on multiple sheets? This particular workbook, I should say, called General Ledger Data Model, has two different sheets, because sometimes when you export data or connect to a data source like an ERP system, it comes out in separate tables. And that means it's going to come in as separate sheets. So this is, and just to show you, down at the bottom, I've got these tabs. So I've got this tab called GL account information, where it has these columns based on the description, the period, and the amount. And on the GL details, it's giving us information. Sorry, I got to click on the GL account information. The GL account information, is the account number, the general ledger account number, the description, and the category. But the details sheet is giving us the period and the amount that matches up with it. So if your information comes in separate, how do we actually analyze this information in a pivot table from 2 different sheets or 5 different sheets, whatever the case might be? What can happen with this is I'm going to actually make sure that this information is in a table first, and the table has a name. So I know this is already in a table because I've got the table design, and this sheet is called GL details. This table is called GL details. If I go to the GL account information, it's in a table and it's named GL account information. So I know which table of data is which, because I can create a pivot table using both tables, both sheets. I'm going to be on this sheet, GL account information. I'm going to go to Insert, Pivot Table. And what I need to do is it's automatically showing me my range of cells, but at the bottom, I need to click Add this data to a data model, which means I can use multiple sheets. If I click OK, it is now going to give me a new sheet with a pivot table like it normally would. But what I'm going to do is in the field list on the right-hand side, at the top, I'm going to click All, meaning it's going to see all of the sheets that have a table. It's going to show me the GL information, account information, and the details. But I need to tell the computer to relate these two. So they have to have a primary key, which is a unique identifier for each row of information. So back in the GL account information, I have this description column, which is all unique values. I have the account, and then I have the category. On the GL details, I have the description column, which is unique values. I'm going to tell the computer to relate those two fields together from both those sheets. So back here in my sheet 1 of my pivot table, I'm actually going to go to the Pivot Table Analyze tab of the ribbon. And I'm going to click the icon Relationships. It doesn't have a relationship already created. Well, this one actually does. It says Active GL Details Description. I could say Automatically Detect. See if it can detect any relationships. This doesn't have any that it detected, but I'm going to double click on this one to show you what it did by default. What it did and what it is showing me, this I already set up to be honest, but it's showing me that on the GL details, it has the description column and then it's showing the GL account information, also the description column. So these two columns are related from each separate table. I'm going to click OK. So the relationship is good. I'm going to close this manage relationship. And I can go to either one of these and expand these out and add any field that I need. So I'm going to go to the GL account information and click description. It's going to give me a unique list of all the descriptions. I'm going to click amount from the GL details, and it gives me a sum of the information coming from that separate sheet. If I didn't have these related, I wouldn't have been able to grab one field from one sheet and another field from a different sheet. It would not understand how they're related to each other. If I want to have the category, I can add in the category. So whatever it is that we click, we can be combining information from multiple sheets. We can combine information from multiple sheets. Absolutely love that capability. Now, of course, we could be doing all of the other pivot table features with this as well. We could be going to any of the, I want to filter with a slicer, I want to have a timeline, whatever the case would be, which, by the way, let me show you a timeline. I'm going to insert a timeline. I only have one field that is a date field. I'm going to click OK. I can use that to filter the dates. So it's showing me, I want to just see July of 2021. Oops, it doesn't have 2021. Let me change this to quarters. So I want to see quarter 1 of 2019. It filters to only show me the general ledger information or your payroll information or whatever it is. I can do it filtered based on slicers or timelines. I never do the drop down for a filter, ever. These are much easier and more efficient to use. So highly recommend getting to know those. Now, I could spend the full day with you talking about different things that can be used in Excel, but let me give you one more example. I'm going to go back to this general ledger. Well, actually, let me go back to that other worksheet. I'm going to come back to the Excel CFOs. So if I'm on a sheet and I want to actually have a checkbox that said, okay, we finished this. I can select where I want them to be. This is a new feature in Excel. I could go to the Insert tab and click Checkbox. It automatically inserts the checkbox feature, which is actually coming from the Developer tab, just so you know. It's a control. I've used them for years, but now we actually have it built right in to the Insert tab. So two features that I showed you today is on the View tab, we have navigation. Love having that navigation. So it automatically will allow us to navigate based on any of the sheets within our workbook, and it allows us to automatically be able to go to a specific named range very quickly as well. So if I want to jump to something, like I want to jump to the chart on the dashboards worksheet, I can have it automatically jump me there. So take advantage of these efficiencies that Excel is bringing into, or I should say Microsoft is bringing into Excel. There's much more and much more coming, but some of the features are only available in the Excel Online, where if you have Copilot, it will automatically analyze your data and see if there's any cleanup that needs to be done, because you might have inconsistent data. And that is very helpful when you are using data analysis with Excel. But right now it's only available online. Okay, so let me quick show you. When I open up this file, by the way, it says fix data inconsistencies and formatting in sheet combined. So Copilot is giving me a couple of suggestions. I need to clean this data up is what it's telling me. So it automatically on the right-hand side would open up what its suggestions are, and it can fix it all automatically. So it's telling me I have extra spaces. If I want to apply that fix, I have inconsistencies, and it's telling me what they are. If I want to apply it, I click apply and it fixes it for me. Gotta love these features. But that's if you have Copilot, just so you know.